At the lake house, my son told me, "You'll take the spare room over the garage, Mom. The cottage is for family this year." I nodded and said that was fine. He didn't know I'd been paying the property taxes on that cottage for 6 years. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat on the dock in the cold and made a phone call to my bank in Toronto. "Good evening, everyone. It's Helen. Thank you for being here with me again. If you'd take a moment to like this video and stay with me until the end, I'd be grateful. And tell me in the comments which town you're listening from, because it always warms my heart to see how far a story can travel. This one isn't easy for me to tell, but I think some of you need to hear it. For most of my 71 years, I believed that a mother's job never ends. My husband, Frank, used to laugh at me for it. He was a millwright up in Sudbury before we moved south, a practical man who measured everything twice. He'd say, "Helen, you give that boy the marrow out of your bones if he asks nice enough." And I would, I think. That was the trouble. When Frank passed 4 years ago, his heart just stopping one ordinary Tuesday while he was shoveling the drive, I was left in our paid-off bungalow in Burlington with his pension, my own teaching pension, and the cottage up on Lake Joseph that his parents had left us. I thought my son, Michael, would be the one to lean on. I had no idea I was the one who'd be leaned on, again and again, until there was almost nothing left to lean against. It started small, the way these things always do. Michael and his wife Brianne had moved to Oakville into a house bigger than anything Frank and I ever dreamed of. Michael did well. He was a regional manager for a logistics company, good salary, company car, the works. Brianne stayed home with the two little ones, my grandchildren, Ava and Cole. The first ask came on a Sunday. "Mom, could you float us the down payment on Bree's new vehicle? The lease is up and the dealer needs it by the end of the month. We're just a bit tight with the mortgage renewal." $11,000. I told myself it was an investment in their safety. My grandbabies riding around in something reliable through Ontario winters. Then it was the children's activities. Cole made the rep hockey team, Mom. The fees, the equipment, the tournament travel, it adds up. Hockey in this country isn't cheap, as anyone listening from up here knows. $4,000 for the season. Then a vase gymnastics. Then the private tutor. Then just a little help with the line of credit. Each time Brianne would call, sweet as anything, and say, "We'll pay you back the second Michael's bonus comes through, Helen. You know we're good for it." Michael got a bonus every February. Somehow it never seemed to make its way back to me, but I never pushed. They'd invite me for Thanksgiving, for the kids' birthdays, and I'd tell myself I was needed, that this was what family did. I was useful. That word, useful, should have been my first warning. The lake house was supposed to be different. The cottage on Lake Joseph had been in Frank's family since the 50s. Just a modest place, really. 3 bedrooms, a sleeping loft, a dock that needed restaining every other summer. But it was ours, free and clear, and the property taxes in Muskoka are no joke. After Frank died, Michael came to me with a serious face and said the cottage was too much for me to manage alone, that he'd take care of the bookkeeping side so I wouldn't have to worry. I was grateful. I signed a few papers. I kept transferring him money each spring for the taxes in the hydro, never thinking twice. This past July, Michael called and said the whole family was going up for 2 weeks. Him, Brianne, the kids, and Brianne's sister's family too. "It'll be a proper Muskoka summer, Mom. You should come up for it." I was thrilled. I hadn't spent real time at the lake since Frank passed. I drove up the 400 that Friday with a cooler of butter tarts and a heart full of something I hadn't felt in a long while. Hope, I suppose. I pulled into the gravel drive behind a row of vehicles I didn't recognize, a big Brianne's sister SUV, a wakeboard boat on a trailer that definitely hadn't been there last year. The dock was crowded with coolers and pool noodles and a brand new aluminum boat lift. Michael came out wiping his hands on a tea towel, smiling. But it was the smile he used to give when he'd broken something as a boy and was hoping I wouldn't notice. "Mom, you made it. Listen." And right there, before I'd even set down my cooler, before I'd hugged my grandchildren, he steered me away from the screen door, lowering his voice. "There's a bit of a situation with the rooms. We've got Bree's whole family here, so the cottage bedrooms are all spoken for. We set you up real nice over the garage. There's a bed and a fan and everything. You'll be comfortable." The room over the garage. I knew it well. Frank used it to store the canoe and his fishing tackle. It had a slanted ceiling you couldn't stand up under and got hot as an oven by noon. I looked at my son and waited for him to laugh, to say he was joking. He didn't. "The cottage is for family this year," he said. "You understand. With the little ones and Bry's sister's kids, we just need the space. It'd be awkward you in the middle of everything." Awkward. I was the awkward one. At the cottage Frank's mother had decorated, the cottage I was paying every cent to keep. Behind him, through the screen, I could see Brienne arranging wine glasses on the deck, laughing at something her sister said. The grandchildren never even came to the door. "That's fine, Michael," I heard myself say. "Whatever's easiest." He patted my arm, the way you'd pat a dog that's finally stopped barking, and went back inside to his guests. I carried my own bag up the rickety stairs over the garage. I sat on the edge of that narrow bed in the heat with the canoe paddles leaning in the corner. And I didn't cry. I'd expected to. Instead, something went very still and very clear inside me, the way the lake goes still and clear in the early morning before anyone's up to disturb it. That evening, after the steaks and the laughing and the kids in the water until dusk, none of which I was part of, I ate a sandwich alone in my hot little room. I waited until the cottage went dark. Then I crept down and walked out to the end of the dock. The loons were calling out on the black water. I pulled out my phone and I called the after-hours line for my bank. "Thank you for calling. You've reached our overnight support. May I have your name and account verification?" "Helen Marsh," I said quietly. Marsh. I gave my date of birth, the answer to my security question, my husband's mother's maiden name. "Thank you, Mrs. Marsh. How can I help you tonight?" "I'd like a full statement," I said. "Every transfer, over $1,000 from my checking and my line of credit, going back 2 years. Can you email it to me?" "I can do that. It may take a few minutes to compile." There was a pause, the clicking of keys. "I'm showing quite a number of transactions, Mrs. Marsh." "That'll be a long statement." "I imagine it will be," I said. "Send the whole thing." I sat out there a long while after we hung up, listening to the loons, watching the cottage windows where my son slept soundly. When I finally opened the email on my phone, the screen lit my face up in the dark. $83,400 in 2 years. $83,000 had gone from my accounts into Michael's. And that wasn't even counting the cottage taxes and hydro I'd been sending him each spring. Money I now realized I had no proof was ever reaching the municipality at all. I scrolled and each line was a little wound. 11,000, the vehicle. 4,000, hockey. 7,500, the renovation. 12,000 last spring, when Brienne had cried on the phone about falling behind on the mortgage. And I remembered then, I'd seen, just a month ago, photos Brienne had posted of their new backyard. A composite deck, a hot tub, a built-in barbecue island that looked like something out of a magazine. I'd thought, "Isn't that nice? They must have saved up." They hadn't saved a thing. They'd been swimming in my hot tub money while I slept over the canoes. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, sitting on that narrow bed with the heat already climbing, I'd made up my mind. I drove home to Burlington 2 days early. I told Michael I had a doctor's appointment I'd forgotten. He didn't argue. He seemed relieved. The Monday after the long weekend, I sat across a desk from a woman named Diane Okafor, an estate lawyer downtown that my own family doctor had recommended. She couldn't have been much past 40, close to Michael's age, but she looked at me the way I wished my son had, like I was a person worth listening to. I'd brought a folder, 2 years of statements, the cottage paperwork, every email and text I'd thought to print. I need to understand what I've gotten myself into, I told her, and I need to protect what's left. She put on her glasses and read for a long time. I watched her face change as she went, the small frown deepening. When she finally looked up, she set the cottage documents on top. Mrs. Malmus. Marsh, did your son explain what you signed when he offered to manage the cottage? He said it would make the bookkeeping easier. She turned the page toward me and tapped a line. This added him as a joint owner with right of survivorship, and this gives him power of attorney over your property. You've been sending him money for taxes, but legally he's part owner of the cottage now. If something happened to you, his share wouldn't even pass through your estate. The dock tilted under me, even though I was sitting in an office on the 8th floor. I never meant to give him the cottage. I believe you, Diane said gently. Here's what we can do. First, we revoke the power of attorney immediately. You have every right to do that. Second, we look at unwinding the joint ownership, though that will take some doing since his name is on title. Third, we put everything else, your house, your investments, your pensions, into a structure he can't touch, and we write a new will. Right now, I'd guess he's your sole beneficiary. He is. We change that. We can set up education trusts for your grandchildren, locked until they're older. We can name whatever else you wish. But Mrs. Marsh, she leaned forward, the moment we file the revocation, your son will be notified. He'll know. Are you ready for that conversation? I thought of the room over the garage. I thought of the hot tub I'd unknowingly bought. I thought of Frank measuring twice and how he'd have had this sorted in an afternoon. I'm ready, I said. We filed on a Wednesday. By Friday morning, my phone rang, and it was Michael, and his voice had a pitch I hadn't heard since he was a teenager caught sneaking the car. Mom, what is going on? I got something from a lawyer's office. It says you've revoked my power of attorney. Are you all right? Did somebody put you up to this? I was standing in my kitchen with the kettle on. I turned it off so I could hear properly. Nobody put me up to anything, Michael. I'm reorganizing my affairs. Reorganizing, Mom? You can't just make these decisions on your own. You're 71. This is exactly why I was helping you manage things. Are you feeling okay? Have you been confused lately? There it was. So fast? I'm not confused. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. This isn't like you. Somebody's gotten into your head. Brian and I talk about this. We worry about you down there all alone. You shouldn't be making big financial moves without family. What if you make a mistake? Family, I repeated. Michael, do you know how much money has gone from my accounts to yours in the last 2 years? A silence. Mom, you wanted to help. The kids, the house, we were going through a rough patch. $83,000 and the cottage taxes on top. And every single time somebody promised me it'd come back when the bonus came through. How many bonuses have you had, Michael? His voice changed then, cooled right off, the warmth draining out of it like dishwater down a sink. You're keeping a ledger on your own son. That's not healthy, Mom. That's paranoid. I think you should talk to your doctor about how you've been feeling. Maybe get assessed. This kind of suspicion fixating on money, that can be an early sign of something. I gripped the counter. My own boy suggesting I was losing my mind because I'd noticed he was robbing me. I am not losing my mind. We're just worried. Bree thinks so too. We're going to come down this weekend and talk about this as a family, get you sorted out. I don't think that's a good idea right now, Mom. And there it came, the softening, the velvet over the knife. Don't push us away. We're all you've got since Dad died. You don't want to end up never seeing Ava and Cole, do you? They love their grandma. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not, I realized, from fear. From a kind of cold fury I'd never let myself feel before in my whole agreeable life. I called Diane and told her everything he'd said. She went quiet, then said something I wrote on a notepad and kept. Helen. Write down every word of that call, the date, the time, the threats. The competency angle and the threat to withhold the grandchildren, those are textbook. If he escalates, we want a record. Escalates to what? To trying to have you declared incapable. If he can get an assessment and a court to agree, he could apply to become your guardian. Control your money legally. It happens more than you'd think to people in your position, so we get ahead of it. You're going to see your own doctor and a geriatric specialist of our choosing, and we'll have documentation that your mind is perfectly sound. Don't let anyone into your house claiming to assess you without me knowing. For 3 days, I jumped at every car on the street, but Michael didn't come himself. He sent Ava. It was a Saturday afternoon when the doorbell rang, and there was my granddaughter, 11 years old, standing on my step alone, dropped at the corner by a car that pulled away too quick for me to see who drove it. She had her hair in a braid coming loose, and she was holding a folded piece of construction paper. "Hi, Grandma," she said. "Can I come in?" I brought her inside and sat her at the kitchen table and gave her a glass of milk and one of the butter tarts that never made it to the lake. "Sweetheart, does your dad know you're here?" "He dropped me. He's waiting at the Tim Hortons. He said I should come talk to you by myself." She unfolded the paper. It was a drawing, the two of us at the lake, stick figures holding hands by a blue scribble of water. "I made you this." "Grandma, are you mad at us?" "Mommy's been crying. She says you don't love us anymore because you took your money away. Dad says you're getting sick in your head and forgetting things. Are you forgetting things, Grandma?" I had to look out the window for a moment so she wouldn't see my face. They'd sent a child to do their guilt for them. They put those words in her mouth. I took both her hands. "Ava, look at me. I am not sick. I am not forgetting anything. Your dad and I are having a grown-up disagreement, and it has nothing to do with you or your brother. I love you more than anything in this world. Do you understand me?" She nodded, but her eyes were swimming. "Then why won't you help us? Mommy says we might have to sell the house." "She says it's because you're being mean." Before I could answer, the door opened. I hadn't locked it after letting her in. And Michael was standing there. He must have driven straight over. "Ava, get in the car, now." He took her by the wrist, not gently. "What did she tell you?" "Nothing, Daddy. She just, Michael, you're frightening her." He rounded on me, and behind him in the doorway now stood Brienne, arms crossed. "We're frightening her? You're the one tearing this family apart over money. Your own grandchildren." "I'm protecting myself from being used," I said. "There's a difference. Used." Brienne laughed an ugly sound. "We trusted you. We thought you loved us enough to help when we were struggling." "I helped you build a hot tub, Brienne." I slept over the canoes. Michael's jaw went tight. He sent Ava out to the car, and when the door closed he dropped any pretense at all. "Here's where we are, Mom. We've already spoken to a lawyer. Given your behavior, closing accounts, accusing your own family, this paranoid fixation, we can apply to the court for a capacity assessment. A judge could appoint a guardian. You don't want strangers controlling your life. So you reverse all of this, you apologize to Bree, and we forget it happened, or we file. You've got until Monday." "Get out of my house," I said. "Think very carefully," he said. "You'll never see those kids again." They left. I stood in my front hall, shaking, and then I called Diane, and within the hour I was in her office signing a sheaf of papers, a written declaration of capacity co-signed by Dr. Patel, who'd been my physician for 18 years, an advance directive, the name of a geriatrician for a formal assessment. Diane looked at me over her glasses. "Helen, I want you out of reach for a few days. Is there somewhere you can go? Somewhere they wouldn't think to look or show up with someone claiming to evaluate you?" I thought of Margaret, not the Margaret in my old stories, my own Margaret, my dearest friend since Teachers College in 1974. She'd retired to a little place in Stratford. We'd weathered everything together over the decades. Yes, I said, I have somewhere. I drove to Stratford that night. For 3 days I turned my phone off and sat in Margaret's garden among her dahlias and let myself just breathe. When I finally turned it back on, there were 31 missed calls and a string of voicemails that started as pleading and ended as something close to a snarl. Mom, please call me back. Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't just vanish. Fine, if you want to play it this way, you'll regret it. We've retained counsel. We're proceeding with the capacity application. You've left us no choice. Margaret listened to me lay it all out over tea in her kitchen. She'd been a paralegal in family law for 30 years before she retired. She set her cup down very precisely when I finished. Helen, they're going to lose. How can you be so sure? Because they're acting out of panic, not strategy. A capacity application with no medical basis against a woman who's already got her own assessment and a lawyer? No judge in Ontario is going to grant that. They're counting on the same thing these people always count on, that you'll be too ashamed and too frightened of losing the grandchildren to fight. They weaponize the love. It's the oldest play there is. She reached across and took my hand. You drew a line. That's not cruel, Helen. That's the kindest thing you'll ever do for those children, to show them you can't treat a person like a bank machine and still be loved without limit. When I got home to Burlington, Diane had been busy. The application had indeed been filed, but Diane explained, almost cheerful about it, that by taking it to court they'd opened a door. It's now a legal proceeding, she said, which means we can request disclosure of their finances. We can show the court exactly what's been going on. She arranged for the geriatrician, Dr. Tid Singh, to do a full assessment. 4 hours of memory tests, reasoning, decision-making. At the end, he took off his glasses and smiled. Mrs. Marsh, you're sharper than most of the residents I supervise. There is not the faintest sign of impairment here. This application is, frankly, an embarrassment to whoever filed it. The hearing was set for a gray morning in late September, in a courtroom at the Milton Courthouse, with rain ticking against the tall windows. Michael and Brienne sat across the aisle with a smooth lawyer in an expensive suit. Michael wouldn't look at me. Brienne dabbed at dry eyes. Diane sat beside me, calm as the lake at dawn, and Margaret was behind me in the gallery. Their lawyer stood and painted a picture, a frail, declining widow, suddenly suspicious, closing accounts, accusing her devoted family, clearly slipping. He called Michael to the stand first, and Michael spoke of his worry, his love, his fear for his poor mother, all alone since his father died. It was very moving. It was almost all lies. Then Diane stood for the questions, and the room changed temperature. Mr. Marsh, you've testified your mother gave you money freely, as gifts. I have here a text message from your wife dated last March. She held it up. It says, "We'll pay you back the second the bonus lands, Helen. You know we're good for it. Does one promise to repay a gift?" Michael shifted. "That's just a figure of speech. And did you repay it?" "Not yet, but did you repay any of the $83,400 your mother transferred to you over 2 years?" The courtroom was very quiet. "Some of it was for the children," he said. "How much did you repay, Mr. Marsh?" "A dollar figure." He looked at his lawyer. He looked at the judge. "None," he said finally. "None. And in that same period you installed a hot tub, a composite deck, and a built-in barbecue. I have the photographs your wife posted publicly, and you purchased a wakeboard boat, while your mother slept in the room over the garage at the cottage she pays the taxes on. Is that right?" "Objection," their lawyer began, but the judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Justice Levesque, waved it off. "I'll allow it. This goes directly to the picture being painted of who is caring for whom. Answer the question." Michael's face had gone the color of the rain outside. "Yes," he said. Diane brought out the cottage title next, and the joint ownership, and walked the judge through how a power of attorney meant to help with bookkeeping had quietly put my son on the deed. Then she called Brienne, who crumbled faster than her husband, contradicting herself twice on the question of the mortgage they'd claimed to be drowning in while booking a March break trip to Mexico. And then Diane presented Dr. Singh's assessment and Dr. Singh's assessment, Patel's letter and the full financial disclosure, line by patient line. Justice Levesque did not retire to consider. She looked over the top of her glasses for a long moment at Michael and Brienne. The application for a finding of incapacity and for guardianship is dismissed, she said. I want to be very clear. I have reviewed Mrs. Marsh's medical evidence, and there is not a shred of basis for the suggestion that this woman cannot manage her own affairs. She is plainly more than capable. What I have seen instead is a deeply troubling pattern, and I am directing that a copy of these proceedings be referred for review, as the financial conduct here may warrant further attention. She turned to me, and her voice softened. Mrs. Marsh, you are free to manage your life exactly as you see fit. I should tell you what I learned from all of it because I think that's why some of you stayed to the end. Diane wasn't finished. Because Michael had taken it to court and lost, and because the joint ownership of the cottage had been obtained while he held a power of attorney he'd misrepresented, she was able to bring an action to set the transfer aside. It took until the following spring, but the court unwound it. The cottage came back to me, free and clear, the way Frank's mother intended, and the judge's referral did have teeth. Michael's company, a logistics firm with strict policies about financial integrity, learned of the proceedings through the public record. He wasn't fired outright, but he was passed over, demoted to a smaller territory, his bonuses gone. The bigger house in Oakville went up for sale by the next summer. The wakeboard boat was the first thing to go. I'd be lying if I told you I felt triumphant. Mostly I felt tired and free, two feelings I hadn't known could sit together. I did not get joy from their troubles, but I did not feel guilty either, and at 71, learning the difference between those two things felt like learning to walk again. The letter came in February, Michael's handwriting, which I'd know anywhere, on a single sheet of lined paper. He wrote that I'd been right, that he'd let Brienne's wants and his own pride turn him into someone who saw his own mother as an account to draw on, that losing the house and the title and the easy money had been the worst, and somehow the best thing to happen to him, that he was in counseling, that Brienne had gone back to work as a dental hygienist, that the kids asked about me. He wasn't asking to come back into my life, he wrote. He just needed me to know he was sorry. I read it 3 times at my kitchen table. Then I put it in the drawer with Frank's old reading glasses, and I didn't answer. Not out of spite. I just wasn't ready, and I'd finally learned that not yet is a complete sentence. In May, Ava found her own way to me. She'd just turned 12, and she got herself onto a go bus with money she'd saved and showed up at my door. And when I scolded her for traveling alone, she lifted her chin and said, I'm old enough to decide who I want to see, Grandma. I read what happened. I know Mom and Dad were wrong. I made her butter tarts, and we drove up to the lake together, just the two of us, and she helped me restain the dock. And she was terrible at it, and I didn't care one bit. On the drive home, I delivered her to her parents' new, smaller house, and Brienne met us at the door with eyes that filled when she saw me, and I said only, she came to me. I'm bringing her home safe. She's old enough to choose, and I won't deny her that. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a window cracked open. I joined a book club at the Burlington Library this past autumn, something Michael's father used to tease me about wanting. I started a watercolor class on Wednesday mornings, and my loons look more like potatoes. And I laugh about it with a widower named Gordon, who's no better than I am. And we go for coffee after, and that's all it is, and it's plenty. And in October, for the first time in my life, I booked a trip just for myself, 3 weeks through the Maritimes, Cape Breton, and the Cabot Trail, and a little inn in Lunenburg where I watched the boats come in and felt Frank beside me, pleased. So I'll ask you what I've been asking myself. If your own child put you in the room over the garage at a place you'd paid to keep, would you keep handing over the keys to buy a little peace? Or would you finally draw the line? Because here's what I know now, that I wish I'd known at 50. Love without limits isn't love. It's just a slow way of disappearing, and it is never, ever too late to come back to yourself. For a long time, I thought love meant never saying no. That if I just kept giving, kept smoothing things over, kept making myself small enough to fit in the room over the garage, the people I loved would love me back the same way. Michael taught me, the hard way, that this isn't true. Every check I wrote without a word was a brick I handed him to build a wall between us, and he was happy to take them, one by one, until he could stand on the other side and tell a stranger his own mother had lost her mind. I've turned it over many times since, and I keep landing on the same plain truth. None of what happened to me was an accident. It followed, step by step, the way one thing always follows another. I said yes to the SUV, so yes to the hockey fees got easier. Yes to the fees made yes to the renovation feel normal. By the time I signed those cottage papers without reading them, I'd already taught my son that my no didn't exist. He didn't suddenly become cruel at that lake house. I had spent years quietly training him to expect everything and own nothing, and Brienne simply learned the lesson alongside him. A child treated as if the parent's pockets are bottomless does not grow up grateful. He grows up entitled and then offended when the well runs dry. What pulled me out of it wasn't anger in the end, though there was plenty of that on the dock with the loons calling. It was finally being willing to look, to open the email and read every line, to sit across from Diane and let her show me the title with Michael's name on it, to hear the number out loud, $83,000, instead of looking away the way I'd looked away for years. Seeing clearly is its own kind of courage, and I'd been a coward about my own life for a long time, dressing it up as devotion. And then there was the part that frightened me most, which was simply standing my ground when he threatened to take Ava and Cole from me. Anyone can be kind when it costs nothing. The harder thing, the thing I had to dig down and find at 71, was the backbone to do the right thing when it cost me the people I loved most. I had to trust that a clean conscience and an open door would matter more, in the long run, than buying a few more years of being invited to dinners where I sat at the children's table. If you take one thing from an old woman who learned this far too late, let it be this. Be good to your people, yes, but be honest with them too, and be strong enough to hold a line when honesty isn't welcome. Goodness without truth just makes you easy to use. Truth without the strength to act on it is only complaining. You need all three working together, or you'll end up where I was, paying for the whole table and grateful for the leftovers.